It feels like soup outside today. The air is super thick, even though it rained earlier. It's weird out there. Today, we're going to talk about everything I read this month. And I read, for me, a lot of books. And we're going to get into it right now. Also, never compare yourself to how many books other people are reading. If you're reading, you are winning. The first book that I read was called Planting Our World by Stefano Mancuso. A lot of it's around trees. It's a nonfiction book. It talks about different stuff such as moon trees and how trees communicate with their root systems and all these different things that have to do with plant life and growth. And there's kind of different little essays. Each chapter is a little bit different. I thought the moon trees was the most fascinating though. One of the space launches, I think it was in the 70s, they took a bunch of seeds up into space and went to the moon. And so these seeds were in zero gravity. And then they came back to Earth. And when they came back, they planted them all over the country. And you can still find these moon trees today. I think it's on the NASA site. So you can just look that up, or you can just Google moon trees and it tells you. I thought it was pretty cool that we actually have one in Michigan. It's in some botanical garden. I want to say it's somewhere with the name with the E, and I don't remember the name of the city, and it might not be with an E. I don't know. It was a while since I looked it up. I love books about nature and stuff of that matter. So the next book we read was Murder Your Employer, The McMaster's Guide to Homicide by Rupert Holmes. I picked this book up because the title was disturbing and it intrigued me a little bit, and I was like, this is either gonna be really good or really bad, and it's awesome. This book had me hooked. Started reading it and it's so freaking weird. There's this college and it's dark academia. The whole purpose of this college is to teach you how to eliminate your target. It's not about producing, serial killers or maniacal killers. It's about, there's these tenets like, will the world be better without this person? Do they have family, and will this affect anyone in their lives? It seems like the targets are usually these really horrid people that are just doing terrible things to people. So other people who are sick of these horrible people go to this college, which doesn't exist, and learn the different ways that they can murder their employer or whoever their target may be. And it is a wild freaking ride, and I loved it. I have a standalone review of it. If you're interested in hearing more about that, I'll have that link down below if you want to check it out. Okay, and after that, I read The Insatiable Volt Sisters by Rachel Eve Moulton. What a fun summer horror. This takes place on an island in Lake Erie. If you know anything about Lake Erie, weird stuff happens there. And this island, weird. There's this family called the Volts, and they have this really strange history tied to this island. And this island is known for these women who go missing there, and they've gone missing over the years, and it usually draws them in. It's usually these women who are experiencing extreme grief or just sad and depressed, and they go there and end up committing suicide and jumping into this horrible pond. And then there's these two sisters, and they grow up and live in this weird haunted house. It's haunted by possibly the ghosts of these missing women, and it's such a wild story. So if you like strange water-based summer horror, The Insatiable Volt Sisters was absolutely fantastic. And I know this author also has another book called Tinfoil Butterfly. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard really good things, so I want to check that one out too. Then I read The Fires by Sigurður Hagalin Bjornsdóttir. It takes place in Iceland, and underneath Iceland there's this whole network of volcanoes. There's always underlying volcanic activity happening, and it follows the main character, and she's a volcanologist. Her father before her was a volcanologist. Basically, her job is to keep tabs on this, and if anything catastrophic is going to happen, her and her team are kind of trying to figure out, following the activity and seeing if anything weird is happening. And so they start detecting really abnormal activity. But on their committee, they have all these stupid political people that come and join it. And they're so worried about tourism and money and blah, 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 blah. They play down the emergency, And then terrible stuff happens, and it's sad and emotional, and it's a weird, wild ride. It's also a love story. After that, we read Sisters of the Lost Nation by Nick Medina. This story focuses on the subject matter of missing Indigenous women and how when they go missing, there's all this red tape because the police from the reservation don't have jurisdiction outside the reservation, and then the police outside the reservation don't care because they're not white. And then the people from the reservation, they can't like do anything about it, and if the people out there don't care, they can't do anything about it, so many women go missing. It shines a light on that, and the story, it follows this character. They work at this casino. At their job, they start to see suspicious activity on this 8th floor of the casino, and they've seen these women who have gone missing after going into a specific room. And then there's also this weird story that I think it's Anna is the name of the character, and their uncle told them the story about these 3 graves that were dug up by where he works. Told them this when they were like 5. And that there was random bones missing from the graves, but the one was like the chief of the tribe, and someone stole the skull. But when they did that, chief came back alive and became like this rolling head and devoured the people who dug up the grave, and then was like, maybe this head devoured these missing women. So you have that weirdness to it, and that comes into play, but also the reality of that it could actually be just horrible people doing this as well. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really well written. I liked the story a lot, and I would highly recommend it. Next up, I read a graphic novel called Ashes by Alvaro Ortiz, and this is the story of these 3 friends that go to spread their friend's ashes in his last request to where he wanted them to spread it. And you follow them through this road trip, and it's weird and crazy stuff happens. And when you get to the end point where they're supposed to spread the ashes, like, it's so touching and emotional, and it was so good. After that one, I read Ascension by Nicholas Binge, and I read this book because Stephen King said it was good. It was really freaking good. It's about this mountain that appears in the middle of the ocean out of nowhere, and nothing is as it seems. The mountain, nothing about it is normal. It has no normal mountain attributes, like stuff that should not exist exists there. And so they reach out to this guy who is a scientist. He's a physicist, and he's gonna go and see what's up with this because he's super intrigued. And they've assembled as this team of all these other different types of scientists. So they go to this mountain, and what happens is there's these weird creatures that exist there. It seems to change the people when they get there as they get higher up into the mountain. Like, they're quick to anger. There's like some weird sort of sound or something going on that's disturbing their thoughts. It's a crazy sci-fi book, and I really loved it. I have a standalone review for that one as well that I'll link down below too, if you want to check that out. But that book is awesome. It's philosophical. It makes you think about stuff. It has a lot of different themes in it, you know, and some of the people that are on the team like believe in God and others don't, and getting those perspectives of like what is and what could possibly be, and the meaning behind this mountain appearing out of nowhere. And someone at one point says it looks like the mountain's been traveling, and then there's these weird time rifts where time like ripples and bends, and it's freaking crazy and great. And then next up, I read The Forgotten Girls by Monica Potts, and this book is a nonfiction book, and it's about women growing up in like the middle states. This one takes place specifically in Arkansas, in these small towns where basically all that's around you is church and religion. It basically stunts the growth of these people, and they don't believe that they should be able to follow their dreams. It's like, oh, you know, just get pregnant and have babies, and they don't lift the women up, and they're like, you should just be a shoe for a man, basically. Do what they want you to do. You know, the pastor talks you into staying in a terrible freaking relationship where the man beats you and stuff, and just the sad realities of some of this. And it's the story of these 2 girls, one who got out and left, and that's the author, and her friend who stayed, and like the drug addiction and the terrible men she was with, and just all this stuff, and trying to get clean and trying to find your purpose when it's kind of beat into you that your purpose is just to chug out babies and, you know, obey a man. It's sad and depressing, but this needs to be brought to light, and people need to realize this is not the only way. There's So many ways that we can lift each other up. It's very poignant and emotional. After that, we read a much lighthearted book called Road to Roswell by Connie Willis. This is a book about this girl, and she's going to her friend's wedding, which is taking place in Roswell, and her friend is gonna marry this UFO nut. She's like, oh, awesome, my friend is in another relationship with a crazy guy, because apparently her friend likes to pick crazy dudes to marry. So she's kind of hoping to stop it. And so she's on her way, and she makes it to Roswell. Her name's Francie. She has to go get something from her friend's car. When that happens, she ends up abducted by an alien. She doesn't believe in aliens, but she sure starts to. It takes her a while to believe her own eyes, but she gets there, and then it turns into this crazy road trip caper, and it was such a fun, weird book. I highly recommend it if you want like a great, just goofy, fun, and kind of like heartfelt book about alien abduction. And it didn't take itself too seriously, and it was super fun. Okay, after that, I read Alice by Christina Henry, and I love Alice in Wonderland. It's always been my favorite Disney movie. I've loved that book since I was a kid, that Through the Looking Glass. And so if there's ever a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, I need to read it. So this book, I heard about it. I guess it's going to be a trilogy. I only knew that there was another book next, The Red Queen, but this book was great. It's very dark and very disturbing. If you read it, please read your content warnings. Honestly, always read content warnings if you're worried about it. This is really disturbing because there's a very heavy theme of human trafficking in it and rape, but the way it's told, and it's weird and it's magical and dark, I loved it. I thought it was really, really great, and I'm really intrigued to see where the series goes as I get the next book and read that. All right, and then another book about plant life and such. The 7-Step Homestead, a guide for creating the backyard microfarm of your dreams, because I want to turn my backyard into like a mini farm. No animals or anything, just mainly like fruits, veggies, herbs, medicinal plants, and whatnot. And it kind of gives you like a whole way to lay it out, and over like the years, how to do a little bit at a time. It's awesome. If you're into anything like that, it had like a 10-year plan, which yeah, you can't do it all at once. That'd be A, way too expensive, B, overwhelming, and C, you just, I don't think you could do it all once. You'd need like a team of people. Okay, so then I read The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. The best book on creativity I've ever read. It's so good. I loved it so much. I got it from the library, immediately had to buy it because I started reading it and I was like, this book is freaking speaking to me. Rick Rubin is tuned in. He's on another level, like another plane of existence from a lot of us, I feel. The concepts and stuff he talks about harnessing creativity and tapping into it just really aligned with a lot of the ways that I think and experience things. And it's just truly fantastic. I also started listening to his podcast, Tetragrammatron, which is awesome. He has all these creatives on there, musicians and actors and sports figures and just people that do creative things. If you want to learn how to tap into your creativeness, The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. Highly recommend it. And because I love weird stuff, I also read The White Monsters of Sherman, New York, and this was put up by the Moth Boys podcast. And it's about this guy who had written a letter years ago when he was like 13. He wrote to John Keel, and John Keel was a journalist. He was really entrenched in the paranormal, probably best known for the Mothman Prophecies and writing the Mothman Prophecies book. There's the Mothman movie that came out called the Mothman Prophecies, and all the stuff that happened around the Silver Bridge and all the settings of Mothman in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And so he had this book, Strange Creatures from Time and Space, and this kid, well, he was a kid then, wrote a letter about these weird giant white sloth creatures that he was seeing in Sherman, New York. And the Moth Boys from the podcast, they grew up in that area and were kind of fascinated by this letter, and they tracked the guy down. So in 2022, they went and met with him. They went around to the spots where like these creatures were seen, and the guy told them about all his encounters. And it's a short little novella. It was really cool that they were able to find this guy after all those years, and I love weird stuff like that. I love cryptids, so it's right in my wheelhouse. So if you like weird things, I'll have a link down below to that as well. I have a standalone review. And let's keep it rolling with the weird books. Northern Lights, High Strangeness in Sweden by Fred Anderson. This book is about weird, strange activity in the sky and on the ground, and some of the lore that comes from Sweden. And what was really great about this book, I've never heard any of the high strangeness stuff from Sweden. So it's all new stories. It's all new stuff I'd never heard. Like a lot of the books you read, it's all the same stories for the past so many years. And it's kind of a fresh breath of air to hear all this new stuff that I hadn't heard about. So to get the viewpoint and learn about the stuff from another country that I haven't heard or seen anywhere was pretty awesome. And then we read What Kind of Mother by Clay McLeod Chapman. This book comes out in September, and oh boy, what a wild ride it is. It's a story about this woman named Maddie. She returns to her hometown after many years. She's a palm reader. She scrapes together a living doing that. She runs into an old flame, Henry McCabe, and he's had some really horrible tragedy in his life. His son went missing when he was 8 months old, and his wife committed suicide, and he's just, you know, trying to live his life, and they run into each other, and maybe there's a little bit of a spark there, and she gives him a palm reading, and she gets like this jolt because she sees something. And then, you know, he still believes that his child is alive and out there somewhere, and so she decides to help him to try and find their child. And it's this story about the power of belief and what it can create, the good, the bad, and the beyond. And it's super weird, and it goes completely off the rails, and it's pretty awesome. Clay McLeod Chapman also wrote one of my favorite books of last year, which was Ghost Eaters, and that was super weird and had a crazy premise and was pretty awesome. And this one also, another crazy horror premise, so maybe you'll want to check that out when it comes out. If you are a fan of videos where I talk about multiple books that I am reading or have read, the next video coming up will be about that. So stick around, check it out, and if you had fun hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again. We'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.